Hello and welcome to the Classic Car Weekly podcast, the sibling podcast to the popular weekly title, and for the first time in what feels like forever, we are back at HQ in Media House in Peterborough, and there is all four of us together. I say all four of us, that's pretty much all that's in the office today as well. So, gents, welcome. I'm the host this week, Jesse Billington, and I'm joined by our editor, David Simmerston.
Hello.
Our deputy editor, Chris Hope.
Hello.
And our content editor, James Peen.
Afternoon.
Gents, we'll kick off as we usually do. How are we and how are the cars coping with the weather? Certainly, it's incredibly hot today.
I'm wishing I had working air conditioning on the Toyota. I've regassed it a couple of times, but it always runs out for a couple of weeks. I think the compressor is dead, so it's very much soaking up the heat and sweating it out for me at the moment.
Possibly a leak somewhere in that system that could be chased out. Yeah, that's one for a future Hour Classics, might I hint. Certainly one that Chris would be excited for. Chris, how are things on your side of the garage?
There's no change, but hopefully I've made space now for the engine crane from my mate to come in, so hopefully going to be catching up with this weekend and hopefully going to be bribing with beers for him to bring it down to me. Once I have it, nothing stopping me. So just to recap, for people who aren't aware, my Mini's engine is leaking like a sieve, and rather than paying for someone to fix it, I'm going to try and take the bull by the horns and sort it myself. I'm sure it will go well. I've read a Haynes manual. I'm sure it'll be fine.
Yeah, the Haynes manual is always absolutely perfect in how it describes things, and yeah, building an engine, as I've found, is perfectly simple as a process.
It can only go well.
Yeah, there's only so many bits that can go wrong.
I'm going to have plenty of things to write about, that's for sure.
There's a lot of our classics coming from you. James, meanwhile, how are things on the driveway?
This is normally what I say with no progress, but actually I did spend a bit of time at the weekend. So took the petrol tank out of the Beetle, cleaned that out, replaced some fuel lines and a dirty fuel filter under the front end. Attempted to raise the suspension a little bit, but I couldn't get it to sag anymore. Maybe everything's a bit hot and a bit gummed up under there, so I think another attempt will be made on that to just sort of raise the ride height at some point. Wired up the dynamometer, attempted to start the car. It was getting fuel through as far as the fuel pump, but no further. So a bit of fuel down the carb, it did fire up, and the generator light did go out. So that I'm taking as a bit of a win. So the next step will be to pop the back wheel off, change the other fuel line that goes through there. Hopefully that's one that's gummed up, and then I'll try and start it again. If it's not that, then it is the fuel pump that needs a rebuild, which I've already priced up. It's like 78 quid for a rebuild kit.
That's not terrible. I can't remember with Beetles, is it pump in the tank or pump off like the engine block?
Off the engine block.
Okay, so it's straightforward to get to, or is it like around the back?
No, it's right there. As soon as you open the deck lid, it's right there. So that should be quite straightforward to do, I'm guessing. So I think, yeah, if it's not getting fuel past that, then it's got to be that. So yeah, that's the next on the list. So hopefully a little bit of time this weekend, although I am also getting it in the necker bag, getting the van finished. So it'll be one car or the other.
Is the kitchen done yet as well? Because I know that previously we've had instalments of Classic Kitchen Weekly and you're waiting on getting bits and pieces sorted there. Is the rest of the project all sorted so you can now focus on the cars? Or
yeah, everything apart from the wiring for the new pendant lights, which trying to find a reputable electrician. We'll leave it there.
That's one for Classic Electrician Weekly, maybe. Chris, you look like you had something to chuck in there just off the back of
it. No. That I had nightmares with electricians and kitchens sort of thing, so I 100% can relate.
You also had nightmares with plumbing and kitchens as well, but that was a completely different story.
Yeah.
One for a completely different magazine. Anyway, I've got updates from my garage as well. It's been a very busy few weeks because, if anyone remembers, at the end of May, the Jimny decided that having a working cooling system was overrated as a concept, so blew most of it out across the M6 on the way to the Young Owners Meet, which actually features in this week's issue. I finally fixed that. I in the end couldn't find a radiator for sale online that I liked the look of, so in the end just phoned up my local Suzuki dealership and said I need a radiator, 2 hoses, some clips and a thermostat, which came to a whopping £630. Considering you could buy radiators online for 50 quid, I really question the quality of those items. So ended up taking the MG to the Suzuki dealership to pick up parts for the normally quite reliable Japanese off-roader in the British Leyland sports car to bring that all home again. Fitted that all the night before I needed to drive it to Silverstone for the British Grand Prix. It wasn't taking part in the race, but I needed something to lug all the camping gear with me. And the MG will cope with the light camping duties. But when you've got a tent, a gazebo, a girlfriend who overpacks, and enough equipment to last for 4 days, Jimny was very much needed. So got it back on the road, filled up, and it's ran perfectly cool ever since. So clearly the fact that it got very hot at the end of May with no coolant in it didn't seem to phase the engine at all. I brought a small OBD2 port reader just to check that the coolant temperature check light went out. It did. There's a slight wobble with the coolant temperature sensor, but I've sort of kept an eye on it since, and it sort of gives accurate readings and runs at a fairly sort of steady about sort of 90 degrees Celsius, pressurizes perfectly fine, no leaks. So touch wood, that's all good. And then weekend prior to that, I drove the MG to Wales on the hottest day of the year, so 36 degrees, and that remarkably had no issues with that at all. It didn't drink coolant, it didn't burn through any additional oil, it just sort of sat at a perfect temperature.
It was just all your other tech that wasn't happy about it.
Everything else, including me, was getting very unhappy in the hot weather because it was 36 degrees. I had the roof down. I was thinking, there's no way I'm going to stay cool with the roof up. So roof down, proper breeze blowing on me. But obviously hot black vinyl seats with like your phone and your headphone case sat on it. Phone just was like, no, we're not even trying to work in this conditions. So just shut itself down. My headphones gave up. So I was like, that's all right, I've got a tape deck. So I was working through the tape collection, and then the tape radio started making funny noises as it also got hot. So eventually I was like, right, well, I'll just listen to the engine then for the next hour until it cooled down. So, did a 400-mile round trip there or thereabouts with the roof down the entire way. So I'm thinking I'm up to just over 700 miles in a month with the roof down as part of my sort of ongoing attempt to track my roof down mileage this year.
Is there a target? I don't remember you saying that you had a...
There's not a target for it as such. I just want to see how far I can go with the roof down in a given year. I think it would be quite interesting.
Didn't know whether you had like 1,000 miles, whether that was a reasonable... Give me around 700 now.
700 in 1 month. I think I've well passed the 1,000-mile mark already. I think I did 300 in, was it March, April, when I drove up and we did the SD1 shoot and all that. That was roof down as well the entire way. So maybe we'll hit 2.5 by the end of summer. I think would be quite a reasonable target if I've got another few busy months. But so far I'm in one of those sort of lovely periods where both of my cars are working, and I always say this, and then one of them immediately goes, what if I failed an MOT or blew something apart? And I go, why would you do that? It was going so well. One of my friends did suggest, why don't you simply buy another car to increase your odds of them working constantly, but then also, knowing my luck, there'd be more chance of them all failing at the same time. But anyway, with that out of the way, the important thing to note is we do have a bumper issue on sale at the moment. And it's a very good one looking at the future of classics. And I've already alluded to the fact that we hosted a young owners meet over at Withall Transport Museum. And we've got the coverage from that event in this week's issue, David.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really big, important issue for our entire classic car hobby. We know from the Federation of British Historic Vehicle Club's National Historic Vehicle Survey that the average age of historic vehicles has actually got older over the last 5 years. So actually bringing in this new generation of enthusiasts and getting them into the cars that we all love and cherish is such an important part of what we do. So we decided not only do we want to explore what's being done to bring these people into the hobby, we also wanted to meet the people who are also who are already doing it. So we met up with more than 20 different enthusiasts at the Transport Museum Withall, and we wanted to find out what is it about the Britain's classic car movement that makes them tick and has made them buy the cars we have. So I was really fascinated by the sort of the variety of cars that turned up, everything from a 1951 Armstrong Siddeley right through to a 2006 Honda Civic. So there's a very broad variety of cars that took part in this event, and it's fascinating finding out all the reasons why people are still getting into old cars.
I think that's it. That's what stood out for me. It wasn't just modern classics that were there that you might expect from youngsters. As David sort of alluded to, for every sort of Honda Civic there was a Mini Cooper, and for every sort of smart 4.4 there was a Morris Minor sort of thing. thing. So, and that's what I find really interesting. What motivates youngsters in terms of the cars that they got. There was quite an interesting sort of American contingent there as well that I didn't really anticipate. I don't know whether you had that thought process that you might find a few pickups at this kind of event. So.
I sort of almost anticipated it, I think, again, because I know a few sort of people through things like the NHRA and their sort of young members sort of branches where there's a lot of sort of enthusiasm for American classics there. So I know that there is this sort of growing acceptance and enjoyment of sort of people my age buying up American classics. And again, much like we're seeing with British classics of the 60s, 70s, American classics are also starting to see that softening of prices, which is therefore bringing in that younger generation and really enthusing them to sort of pick up these cars while they can and enjoy them and make the most out of them. And again, for young people, often your car is your sort of a hobby. It's what your disposable income goes into. So often it's usually quite sort of something quite interesting and also very personalised. We saw a lot of cars that are modified and enjoyed in very different ways. They're sort of not just turning up in a standard sort of Morris Minor or a stock sort of Mini. There's been tweaks, modifications, restorations, resto mods that have really helped these people get enthused by the hobby and find sort of their place within it and find the community that works for them. Has been the really interesting thing that I found, was so many people have found a place in the classic community because that's where they can feel at home and that's where they can enjoy their cars and be themselves and express themselves through their cars, be it the modifications, the people they meet up with. It's really quite sort of a pleasant sort of turnaround from it, I think.
Oh yeah, I mean, you might not agree with every car that's there or have an interest in it, but you can't doubt the passion that these people show for their cars, sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, from you were mentioning sort of the American cars and things like that. What I hadn't quite appreciated reading it is that, assuming you are lucky enough to have the space for something like that to store and all the rest of it, the running costs aren't especially different from something established, well catered for, like an MX-5 sort of thing. So yeah, why not be different? So
yeah, and again, if it's not your daily driver, it doesn't matter if you've got a giant sort of 300 sort of cubic inch Ford V8 or something that's only doing 20 miles to the gallon, because realistically you're getting that from an Austin, Healey and E-Type, your more archetypal classics anyway. The running costs aren't the point, it's the enjoyment, it's what it means to you, it's the aesthetic of it, the fun of it, the meets you can go to as well. And certainly American classics often have a more vibrant sort of meet scene. They often are like sort of drag racing events, and there's sort of a very dynamic aspect to it which draws in people from those sort of crowds, and it's good fun. And again, really interesting seeing the mix of it. And a lot of people, annoyingly, because of the weird way social media works, is we put the video out promoting it beforehand and saying, so look, come along to this, it'll be really good. And a lot of people engaged with the TikTok then, and then sort of the event happens, and then TikTok went, well, what if we showed this to more people? I was like, but the event has happened. So a lot of people going, oh, I can't believe I missed this, are you going to do another one? I'm like, maybe, I don't know. We'll have to discuss that for a later point in time when I can find a gap in my calendar. But it's nice to see people enthused by it and people sort of ready to engage with the idea of sort of multi-mark young members meets just at places.
Well, I know we always talk about demographics and people buying the cars they remember, but do you think with young people, like, you want to stand out from like your parents a little bit? So as everyone's cars got newer and full of tech, there's a sort of a draw towards the more old school stuff, you know?
There's definitely a draw to that sort of level of do-it-yourselfness and the sort of plain functionalityness of it. I speak to a lot of my friends who are into cars. I think this is the thing of people who are into cars are slowly finding themselves becoming classic car fans, because if you're a motoring enthusiast at my age, you look at what's offered on the modern scene and it's all a bit homogenous, it's all a bit bland, it's all a bit sort of shapeless and electric. Whereas if you start looking at older cars, it becomes interesting, it becomes very varied, it becomes sort of very hands-on and very engaging in a sort of tactile way. And that's what people are starting to look for in their cars, and they're finding that they can achieve that through relatively cheap means. You can go out and buy a fairly bog standard sort of original Mini or a Metro or a Morris Minor, anything along those lines. It's very analog, and you can engage with it and have something that stands out from just general motoring traffic as well. Sort of, there's a great phrase that sort of goes around on social media with sort of people that have bought classics is because they want to stand out from just driving what's usually called NPC traffic, non-playable character traffic. It's just the most anodyne stuff on the road. You want to be different, so they've gone out and bought a bright red Triumph Spitfire because they want to be different. They want to have something that's enjoyable and can become a part of their personality as well. And that's the really interesting way that young people are sort of engaging with classics. They're not cars they grew up with. They're not stuff that was on the drives and on the roads when they were growing up. It's just stuff that stands out to them, and I think that's the really interesting thing.
Yeah, completely agree. When I went up to the Moffat Classic Car Show week before last, and I went up in a rented Nissan Qashqai. I couldn't tell you a single interesting thing about that car because it was so bland and I say anodyne just blended into the crowd. So, whereas all those cars that were there, and there were people of all generations enjoying them, was so I could talk to the cars complaining about the cars that are at the show, but the car I went there in again just completely just switched everybody off.
Don't get me wrong, as a motoring journalist there is by and large a place for regular modern traffic, but if you get excited about cars and the idea of owning them and enjoying them, that's what's driving people my age and younger. Bear in mind that I'm 28, I'm sort of a decade on from passing my driving test. There are people far younger than me that I sort of see on social media that are sort of, while they might have a bog standard Ford Fiesta as their sort of everyday car, they're now buying the Morris Minors, the early Minis, because they want something that's actually enjoyable and something they can be a part of and actually has the community side to it. And places like Caffeine and Machine and all the other sort of cars and coffee meets are really good at fostering the community around sort of having a car, going places, meeting people, doing something. And again, we spoke in a couple of episodes back and a couple of issues back about sort of social media and the fact that everything seems quite weirdly siloed online. Classic cars don't have an online-ness to them. They're very much a thing that you have to be there in person to enjoy, and that's drawing people out and to events and sort of making people go outside and see people. I think that's also such a key thing, is people like it because it has that in-person community. When it goes wrong, someone comes and helps you fix it. We had that at the event. One of the minis started a bit of a misfire. It had a one.
Yeah, and everybody started crowding around to try and fix it, didn't they?
Yeah, there was 4 different owners sort of chipping in with sort of fixes and tips, and one guy brought his car around because he had tools and parts with him, and it's that community thing that very quickly springs up at a meet that has maybe 25 people at that have never met before in their lives. But something can go wrong, and there's the shared knowledge and that acceptance and sort of nice sort of community spirit that sort of immediately comes together, which is great.
Yeah, and the thing that struck me as well is any notion that people in their sort of their childhood, their teens, their 20s aren't interested in old cars and were absolute cobblers. I mean, there was so much passion, at that particular, for all sorts of different old cars, and it's just it gives me a lot of hope that the cars that we love will go on to another generation of enthusiasts in years to come.
And even the sort of owners that came along in modern classics, and I sort of spoke to them and asked them sort of, would you look at getting something older? And I know the fellow that turned up with the Civic, he'd had minis previously, sort of original shape minis, and he said it's something he'd love to go back to. He's got a young family at the moment, obviously that takes a priority, but down the road he said one of the things he'd love to do is go back to sort of the archetypal sort of classic cars and sort of get back into that, because he absolutely loved doing up his minis and sort of restoring them, working on them and enjoying them. So there's this really sort of strong suit that there is this next generation coming in, but it's the question of sort of where do they find themselves at events, where do they find themselves with clubs. There's sort of the broader questions. They've started to find their own communities and make their communities, which is really good. But when it comes to the more mainstream sort of club side of things, there are clubs that are doing it well and there are clubs that are still learning. David, I think you wrote the feature on which clubs are doing it best when it comes to young owners.
Yeah, there's all sorts of different things, and one of the great things I've seen is there's a lot going on to engage young enthusiasts as well. We talked before about things like Borrow a Classic, formerly the Classic Car Loan Project. They've done some great work in working with clubs to lend cars to people who are new to the hobby. But again, we've seen some great initiatives. The Jowett Car Club offering free membership. We've seen the likes of the MX5 Club, giving out their stand at the NEC to young enthusiasts to give them a platform to show off what they're doing. So there's all sorts of really interesting things that are going on within the hobby, and I think it's great that clubs are actually taking the lead on this, because at the end of the day, these young enthusiasts, they are the people who are going to keep these clubs running in the future.
And again, I sort of speak from within inside Midget and Sprite Club, one of the ones that's featured on your list. They have their Restorer of the Year, which is always sort of a big accolade for sort of getting young people not just to own these cars and enjoy them, but sort of learn the skills of fixing and repairing that go alongside them. And James, sort of, you're fairly sort of deep into the sort of air-cooled and the classic Volkswagen Club. Are you seeing the same thing from that side of things? Is there sort of a growing young sort of movement within the air-cooled world?
It kind of goes back to what we were just saying a second ago about when people sort of, you grow older and like you have to sort of step away from having an air cooled for a while. So a lot of the people I know, now I'm 50, had started with Beetles, and then you went to a few shows, so you got a camper van, and then you outgrew the camper van because your kids became like 6'7" tall or whatever, and then they end up coming back. So a lot of people who I've known for donkey's years have gone back to owning Beetles, but because they took their kids to shows, their kids are now buying cars as well, and they're buying not just Beetles, but they're going for the sort of more modern stuff. So they're buying Golfs or new Beetles or anything with Volkswagen, but I should keep it in the family. But that's kind of like they've passed on that love for the brand.
Yeah, and it's finding that next generation, and I mean we see it sort of. Chris, you've been to a couple of mini meets as well, and are you seeing the same sort of pattern emerging there as well, with sort of families turning up, not necessarily with sort of more modern minis, but just sort of young kids enthused by the mini scene?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's exactly as James just described, whereby the family have a collection of minis and make a point of taking them all along, sort of thing. So parking them together becomes a bit of a novelty in itself, sort of thing, and it becomes a talking point that people then want to sort of go and chat to these people. And I think it's great to see.
It's a really enthusing one. Again, David, the piece you put together, it sort of celebrates the 5 clubs that are doing it well, and there's some really interesting stories coming out from the club scene at the moment. And James, I know that you put together one which was sort of the training of the next generation. We mentioned sort of Midget and Sprite Club with their young restorer. It's a broader thing, young people getting into sort of working on classic cars and sort of the lengths and efforts that apprenticeships are going to.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking quite a lot recently about skills dying out, and the need for apprentices to be trained up in the art of maintaining old cars. So obviously the person to speak to there was John Pitchforth at the Heritage Skills Academy, and had a very lengthy few conversations with him. Really filled me in on what the academy does, how many people go through it. I think they've trained something like 800 people so far. There's 200 to 300 people going through at the moment, and they have no shortage ever of candidates. So that's kind of quite encouraging to see that there's still people out there who want to get into it. And actually, the sort of career path you can go down once you've gone through the Heritage Skills Academy is quite amazing. It made me think maybe I shouldn't have wasted my time going into journalism.
Yeah, it would have been a lot more fun just learning to pick up the spanners. But also, I know that John spoke at the HCVA conference earlier in spring, and he said one of the amazing things was the fact that so many sort of restoration firms are really getting on board with the programme and are very eager to take on an apprentice from the Heritage Skills Academy, because they know the quality of the apprentice they're getting as well, and they know that it's not going to be someone that they just need to leave to sweep the floor. It's someone they can actually task off with doing like proper skilled work, whether it's panel beating, whether it's engineering, machining, actually sort of putting engines back together, anything along those lines. It's such a well-skilled, well-equipped program that it's producing sort of apprentice almost seems to sort of not do it justice in the term of sort of the level of skill that these people emerge from the course with. So it's enthusiastic. It's really positive to see the sort of the processes that are in place sort of for teaching people. And
it was the statistic that stood out to me was that 5-to-1, where you've got for every 5 people that are interested in having an apprentice place, there is one apprentice place, sort of thing. So there's clearly no shortage of people that want to sort of get into this particular industry. And it's fantastic to hear that obviously there's more and more specialists out there that are looking to take an apprentice on, sort of thing, so that you can obviously share this knowledge.
And obviously the places that have taken on apprentices take on the next wave that comes through as well, and they then spread the word saying, no, go for it, get one of the apprentices from here, because they're good, they know what to do, you don't have to handhold them. So it's really sort of almost self-perpetuating. It feeds and opens up those places, and again, like you said, there's already more places available than there are sort of apprentices coming out the other end, and that's, if anything, a really positive sign that there's going to be these enthused and well-skilled restorers and engineers coming through for the next generation. Next up on the list of features we had was what are the experts saying on how to hook the next generation? This was a really interesting one when it comes to sort of what are the people from within the industry actually seeing as sort of captivating young owners, and what's getting their attention. And I know this was this the one that we sent out to one of our contributors to write? But Chris, I know you'll have sort of read through this one.
I think a lot of the things we've already sort of touched on, whereby there's an inherent tendency to go towards cars that are sort of considered cool, but also cars that are considered to be affordable, sort of thing. So the contributing question, John Joe Volans, he sort of said that he had no shortage of interest and positivity come from the water-cooled Volkswagen and the Porsche sort of side of things as well. They sort of talked about how they can cater for and accommodate younger enthusiasts by pointing them towards slightly cheaper cars that they can sort of start out in, and then make that switch to larger engine, bigger cars as they move along, sort of thing. So making that jump from sort of polo to golf. I think in terms of hurdles, insurance continues to be an issue. Certain clubs, I know you mentioned the MX5 club. I know that they've got their own initiative, haven't they? Their own agreement with one of their insurers.
There's various clubs who have schemes that help encourage younger enthusiasts, and typically it will tend to be, if you are a member of the club, particularly if you are sharing the car being brought through with parents, there's certain criteria which help to lower the risk from an insurer's point of view. So if you're just any old 17-year-old and you go to a mainstream insurer, they might see you as quite a big risk taking out quite a specialist car. But if you can prove you're part of an enthusiast community that is looking after those cars, and you have form with your parents in particular, that helps to bring down the cost of the premiums and thus the price of entry into the hobby.
I mean, the contributor John Joe, he chatted to the Stag Owners Club as well. They're making efforts to reach out to younger generations, but they're finding it quite difficult. The main problem that they're encountering is that financial burden of the one-off cost of buying a Stag outright in the first place, sort of thing. These cars, I mean, from whatever point of view you look at, they're either expensive or affordable, sort of thing. So you're looking at 5 figures realistically to get a decent sorted Stag, sort of thing. So and obviously the club acknowledges that the other Triumph clubs have had a better response, sort of thing, from the youngsters, and they are trying to sort of work with those clubs to try and learn those lessons and apply them where they can, sort of thing. So I think there's a lot of positivity there. I think the more important thing is that even those clubs that are perhaps not the early adopters, there's still a willingness there to learn from those clubs who have enjoyed success, to find what's worked well for them and how they can perhaps apply it themselves. So all is not lost if it is that you don't have a young register, or you don't have a number of sort of young sort of members within your club. It's never too late to sort of start sort of putting down the groundwork where you can hopefully build upon that.
Yeah, never too soon to start doing the early work. And you said sort of the Stag Club looking at the other Triumph clubs. I know the Triumph Sports 6 Club, I've got a lot of friends in there. They recently did their young owners rally round the Isle of Wight. So they all sort of went for a big sort of camping weekend, driving their cars around the island and doing stops and things. The things you'd expect from the more sort of senior clubs and everything there. But it's nice to see sort of the clubs learning from one another, and that's possibly something where the FBHVC can really step in, which is the Federation of Clubs, with helping that sort of sharing and spreading that knowledge. So it'd be sort of an interesting thing to sort of keep an eye on as it sort of moves forward.
I think that from what I've seen of the hobby, I think the two biggest barriers at the moment, it's not the cost of entry, because we know that classic car values are a little softer than they have been, nor do I think it's necessarily the cost of insurance, because we talked about the sort of the schemes that are there to help young owners. I think the bigger barriers are the general wider cost of living. We all know that things in general are not as cheap as they used to be, and that can help squeeze your disposable spending. That's not just for young people, that's for people of all generations. And the second thing is garages. For a lot of people in their sort of their early 20s, particularly if you're renting properties, chances are you probably don't have access to a garage to put an older classic in, and that can be something that can stop you from buying an older classic.
Don't get me started about trying to find a house with a garage. I know it's also been a hurdle for Chris, but if you look, also this is going to sound completely off topic, but if you look at a lot of new build estates, so few of them are being built with garages next to them. You'll have a little driveway spot, but there isn't actually covered space. And I don't mind parking the MG out during the summer, but in the winter I do want to put it somewhere dry and a bit warm.
But this is a good reason for a youngster to get into cars. Stay at home with your mum and dad, occupy their garage.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate. I've got quite a lot of garage space to occupy, but the problem is I'm now 28 and still living at home with my parents. So there is a tipping point.
But then you've still got a cool car.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, 2 cars that have a lot of space to work on them when they go a bit wonky, but also sort of getting to the point where I would like to be living outside of home, and also you cannot live in an MG midget. I mean, you could find a way of trailering the midget behind the chimney, live in the back of the chimney like some sort of sort of hermit with a British Leyland fetish. But
certainly when my very first reporting job when I worked, I was working as a trainee reporter in Real. I lived in a flat above a shop, and I didn't even have a driveway, let alone a garage. So there's no way I could have kept sort of a partially restored Austin A35 on the road outside. It just would have been a non-starter at that point in my career.
I mean, I'm very fortunate in the fact that while I'm looking for sort of properties to move into with my girlfriend, she does appreciate that she has a proper grown-up job, let's say, and she said, look, if we have to pick somewhere which doesn't have a garage, we can find a garage locally and I will rent it for you. So she's been very kind in that sense. But again, that's a very sort of rare one-off situation where she's gone, look, I'll indulge your sort of love for your cars and I'll let you have like your own little space to tuck it away. But yeah, it is one of those hurdles of sort of, what do you do if you get into classic cars and you're young, and then you've got to go, well, I've got to put it somewhere, or just risk street parking it. And again, a lot of classic insurance policies ask that it's not street parked. Weirdly, there is sort of a drop off if it's kept on a driveway, but goes up again if it's kept in a garage. That's a weird insurance quirk. But it's one of those things of you need somewhere to put it, and unfortunately you can't just sort of like stow a car away in a cupboard underneath the stairs like you might be able to a bicycle. But anyway, completely getting distracted as we usually do. But anyway, there is a lot of absolutely brilliant features in this week's bumper issue looking at the next generations that are coming through. There is obviously 20 sort of interviews from the main event that we held with all the interesting cars and their owners, and also sort of the fact that you can go out and buy a lot of these cars for remarkably affordable prices. There were some really interesting cars out and about on sort of the sale options that I sort of found as I was digging around, and yeah, there's some interesting cars out there for sale within those reasonable brackets.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the great things with the hobbyist is at the moment is regardless of what you're looking for, there is actually quite a lot out there at the moment. You only have to look at sort of the latest auction results to see that you can get you can certainly get sort of usable old interesting cars for the price of a season ticket or a smoking habit.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, I know we're talking about affordability, but as a kid, I mean, we all would have probably wanted like a Lamborghini or a Porsche, but you start off with what you can afford and what you think is cool, and then you work on it. Hopefully, you improve it. You sell it on. You go up the food chain. So you might have started. I started with a Beetle, ended with a Porsche. Got back to a Beetle, obviously, but you know what I mean. It's like that's how it goes. So yeah, you might want that. So it's talking about the Stag Club. So, you know, Stags might be out of reach now, but you can buy a Spitfire.
Spitfire, yeah.
Yeah, and eventually, when you can afford the insurance, you can afford to buy one, then you get your Stag.
You work your way up the list. I've started with an MG Midget, and I don't know, for the moment.
Just stay there forever.
Yeah, I might just stay there forever. They're such good fun. I mean, I was just saying that at auction, when I did buy the Midget, the backup option a couple of lots later was a giant 75 Cadillac Coupe de Ville in brown.
Which you could have lived in.
Yeah, which would have solved the accommodation problem as well.
And don't forget, I mean, the other thing, I remember Mike Brewer actually, Wheeler Dealers, made this point to me. He said that you can buy a car, you know, a Mini or a Spitfire or a GT6 or something for however much it is, and you can look after it, enjoy it for a year, and then you can sell it on for pretty much the same, it might make a small gain or a small loss either way. If you're in any other hobby, you know, you're fishing or you're golfing or you're going to football matches, once that year is gone, it's gone.
Yeah, that is the thing. Even if you sort of make a small loss on the car, but you consider sort of your enjoyment of it, whereas that compared to any other hobby, it's probably it's fair to say that it's one of the most, not necessarily lucrative, but least loss-leading hobbies out there. You can't really sell a set of used golf clubs for exactly what you paid for them, unless you are Tiger Woods. But yeah, I don't.
Tickets to a football match that's been and gone.
There's probably a collector out there that might pick them up for a reasonable price, but certainly not the original face value. The collector's world is a very strange place indeed. But anyway, elsewhere in the bumper issue, let's see, we've talked about findings in the Trading Next Generation, and we've talked about where else have we got in this issue? We've got a lot to look forward to. There is, I'm trying to remember what we've previewed in the Out and About pages as well for this one.
There's lots of things. There's MG versus TVR, a V8 battle. We've got 10 years. I can't believe it's 10 years since we started doing Value My Classic, which has been one of the most popular parts of Classic Car Week. So Russ Smith is sharing his expert tips on the most interesting classic car values from the past decade. We've got 40 great events coming up over the summer, which you can add to your diary. There's all the latest news. There's lots of things to look forward to in this issue. So make sure you pick up a copy. Make sure you don't miss out on it this week.
Yeah, plenty to enjoy, and there's plenty to enjoy in the next issue as well, because I know that as soon as I finished at Media House today, I'm packing my bag and heading down to Goodwood for 4 days at the Festival of Speed, so there's plenty to enjoy coming on the back
Yeah,
of that
lots of
as well.
classics taken by that this week.
Yeah, it's a remarkably
packed weekend.
Yeah, remarkably classic heavy one this year, which I'm really looking forward to. I think we've got about 18 different anniversaries that I need to add to the sort of my shooting list of things to find and go and enjoy. So yeah, I've got a busy weekend. Anyone else heading out to any shows or events this weekend?
Not this week. I know the weekend after we've got obviously Sunday the 19th of July. Coffee and Cars Withall is back. So if you fancy showing off your classic, it's free of charge if you're driving in. Great chance to meet up with classic car owners. That's Transport Museum Withall in Worcestershire. But there's loads of things going on at the moment. But yeah, if you do fancy a Sunday morning catch up with fellow classic owners, that's a really good one to get to.
Yeah, if you want to find something on, check out Chris's preview of 40 summer events that are coming up through the rest of the season, and also check out the rest of the Out and About pages. I think we managed to sort of shoehorn almost 4 different events at the British Motor Museum on into one small section, so they've got plenty on, let alone the rest of the UK. Otherwise, gents, that is about all we've got time for on this week's episode of the Classic Car Weekly podcast. We'll hopefully be back next week. Are we in person next week? I can't remember.
I think we'll be from various parts of the country next week. I'm sure the heat wave will hit. We'll be trying to stay in the shade, but no, looking forward to it as ever.
Maybe we won't do next week's one with a video feed in case it's too hot and we'll have to be topless. Anyway, I'll leave you with that.
There's an image.
No, there is an addition to the podcast.
I'll leave you all with that very pleasant idea to enjoy. James, Chris, David, thank you very much for joining me this afternoon.
Joy as always.
Thank you.
And we'll be back next week with another edition of Classic Car Weekly and another episode of the Classic Car Weekly podcast.